Well, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to participate in devotions with you at Divisional Headquarters this morning. My name is Major Roger Glick, and again, thanks for allowing me to participate. During Holy Week, I wanted to focus on the words of Christ from the cross. I don't want to take a lot of time this morning, but I do want to just discuss some of those, the words of Christ from the cross this morning. It's not surprising to me that these words first spoken by Jesus from the cross, of course, were a prayer, and it really is about for whom Jesus was praying. Who's the them? And that's what I want to talk about a little bit about this morning. Who's the them that Jesus was talking about when he said, God forgive them? And of course, we know Jesus was talking about the soldiers, right, who had cruelly tortured and crucified him and were preparing to gamble for his clothes. Jesus said, forgive them. There, of course, was the crowd that had gathered. There's always a crowd, right? And they were beginning to verbally assault Christ. And Luke notes that they were ridiculing him, shaking their heads at him. And Jesus says, Father, forgive them. Then, of course, there's the religious leaders. Yes, the religious leaders are always present, aren't they? And because of their own jealousy and their spiritual blindness, we know that they conspired with the Romans in order to kill Christ. Just like false prophets in the day of Jeremiah were also sought out and they were killed. So for these leaders, he prays, Father, forgive them. Now, this is astounding to me to think about this mercy, this level of mercy, this prayer as Jesus hangs on the cross. It's one of the most powerful scenes for me, I think, in all the Gospels. There's somebody else, though, that's included in this prayer, somebody for whom Jesus was pleading from the cross, and it's extended to them, and I think that's us. I believe we are also included in this message, this prayer, when Jesus is saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. There's an old gospel hymn that says, were you there? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Well, in a real spiritual sense, yes, we were there, because we know this experience of Christ on the cross, of course, it transcends time. And so Jesus finds himself there, not just pleading for an atonement for sin. He becomes the atonement for sin. He becomes the offering. He becomes the sacrifice. And so from that perspective, of course, what Jesus did, as I said, transcends time. So it's the present day when he existed there, and then, of course, for us as well. So I want you to just take a moment this morning, and I would like to challenge you to think about those people who have wronged you, those people who you're perhaps at odds with. Can you forgive them this morning? Like Christ forgives those in the past, those who are present that day when he was experiencing this, and then even into the future for us, he becomes an atonement for us. Can you forgive those who have wronged you? My mom used to say, you're known by the company that you keep. You know, my mom had a lot of sayings. Some of them made sense. Some of them I didn't get till later. This was a pretty easy one that she said. You know, in life and in death, Jesus associated with a lot of people that troubled the religious leaders. There's those religious leaders again, right? They were troubled. And in Luke 15, we note that it's recorded. It says, now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, speaking, of course, of Christ. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow, he welcomes sinners and he eats with them. Yeah, he does. Jesus allowed a prostitute to wash his feet with her tears. He called the tax collectors and a garden variety of sinners to be his disciples. He ate with lepers, for goodness sake. Jesus ate with unclean people. We see this kind of association throughout the ministry of Jesus. It really was a hallmark, if you will, of his ministry. And this is what I love. When Jesus was around non-religious people, they didn't feel small. When Jesus was around people who were there just to learn about God, they were there to hear what Jesus had to say about God. They were longing for something, but Jesus didn't make them all feel bad. He didn't make them all feel terrible. Yes, he pointed out sin. Yes, he said, go and sin no more. But he somehow was able to impart value to them. And it wasn't all negative and it wasn't bad. And as Jesus lived, so he died. You know, even as Jesus is being crucified, he's carrying out the mission of the Father, right? In his own mission, he's associating with sinners. Jesus is the only righteous, sinless human being. And it's recorded that he said the Son of Man came to seek out who? He came to seek out and to save the lost in Luke 19. So in his final conversations with a criminal and a thug on the cross, they're rethinking their response to Jesus as they begin, I think, to see his character, and they begin to see his mercy. They begin to see what's happening here. And Jesus offered these men eternal life. I just simply said all that to say this to you. Do you see how important lost people are to Christ? They're incredibly important. I mean, they must have been and they must still be, because it drove him to the cross. Lost people must be the most important thing to Christ. And so if it mattered that much to Christ, how much should it matter to Christ followers today? Let me make it more personal. Do people who don't know Jesus, who know you, are they comfortable with you? After they've left a conversation with you, do they feel better or worse? Do they feel like nobodies? Do they feel valued? Do they feel devalued? What's your experience? What would happen if all Christ followers would just commit to reaching out to those who don't know Christ through compassion and love? I wonder how that might change the world. The third time Jesus speaks from the cross, he, of course, is speaking to his mother, and he's speaking to his disciple, John, his closest disciple. And this scene is moving, and it's very tender. And let's consider the fact that there were 3 women at the foot of the cross with John, and John makes sure we know, of course, that he is there, and he makes sure we know that Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, the wife of Clopas, Mary Magdala was there. He was there. The other disciples, well, you know, they're off kind of watching perhaps what's going on, but they're certainly not up close and personal to the cross. John's the lone disciple who's there. The rest, as I said, remain at a distance because they're afraid. And I'm not going to deride them for that, because who knows what we would have done. But perhaps the most common understanding of this passage is that even as Jesus is hanging on the cross, even as Jesus' life is ebbing and flowing away from him, Jesus wants to make sure that his mother's taken care of. While his mother is there consoling him, he wants to make sure that his mother's taken care of. So he calls to John, and he says to John, I need you to take care of my mom. I need you to make sure she's taken care of when I'm gone. And to his mom, I need you to accept the care of John, the protection of John. And this is so tender to me that even as he's hanging on the cross, he's looking out to make sure that his mother is cared for. And this to me harkens back to the 5th commandment, where God tells humanity we are to honor our parents. And we see Christ carrying that out. How wonderful is that? Now, for many, this next statement on the cross that Jesus makes has been received as one of the most moving. It's been received as one of the most disturbing. It's been received as a powerfully haunting statement by some. Some still struggle with it theologically and struggle with, well, what exactly does it mean? When Jesus utters the words, my God, why have you forsaken me? God, where have you gone? God, what are you doing? These words reflect not only the darkness, I think, in this horrific scene that's unfolding with Christ on the cross and this experience that Jesus is enduring, but also, I think, the darkness that surrounded those who were there. There was a crowd there, and there was a darkness that existed within that crowd, those who were at the foot of the cross. And as we study the psalm that Jesus, several psalms that Jesus is uttering from the cross, we discover these words point to something deeper, and these words point to something that perhaps was in fact sustaining Christ while he was on that cross. Now, before Jesus utters this cry of dereliction, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, the Roman soldiers, they had maligned him. They had mistreated him. The crowd had mocked him relentlessly. Passerbys had, people who were passing by had derided Christ. One would think that when you're passing by in a crowd and you see something happening, you would seek to rescue someone. Now, I get it's a crucifixion, it's a Roman crucifixion, I understand that, but why would people passing by hurl hate? Why would they hurl cruelty at this event that was taking place? And it simply wasn't the problem of first century Jews. So I don't want for us to go, well, yeah, you know, those Jewish people of the first century, they were really bad people. I mean, hey, look what they did to Jesus. I'm here to tell you that there is something in the human condition that's flawed. There is something within the human condition that causes us to pile on. There's something in the human condition that causes us, that moves us in the wrong direction and causes many of us to do things that are unthinkable, that are unfathomable. And that's a hard word, and I messed it up. I'm not going to try to say it right, but it's just unthinkable. I think that this is an opportunity for us to look at what's happening and hold up a mirror and look into our own souls and ask ourselves the question, what's wrong with us? What about us? We are to be seen here. I guess a deeper question would be this. What impulses exist in humanity that cause us to do horrible, horrific, terrible, unthinkable things? Like, how in the world could Germans kill millions of Jewish people? How is that possible? How could Germans kill millions of other human beings? And a lot of people went along with it and said, yeah, that's okay. Oh, sure. Or, oh, I can't do anything about that. How is it that in the old Soviet Union, communist, fascists, dictators could kill millions of their own people? They did. They did. Millions of Soviets died at the hands of communist dictators. What about the Khmer Rouge? The Khmer Rouge killed almost 800,000. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It was 1 million. The Khmer Rouge killed 1 million Cambodians. What? How does that happen? What in the human heart says, yeah, it's okay. Let's annihilate those people. Let's dehumanize those people. Let's get rid of those people. What about the Houthi in Rwanda? That's even more recent history for us. The Houthi in Rwanda took machetes, not guns, machetes, to 800,000 of their fellow church members. What? Yeah, did you hear that? Church members. 800,000. Co-workers, neighbors. They killed them. They killed them because they weren't Tutsis. They weren't like them. They were different. See, the impulse in the human heart to do evil exists, even today. You can't objectively look at our country today and go, oh yeah, everything's great. No. We are more divided as a country than we have ever, I think, well, at least in my lifetime, we've ever been. And I often thought to myself, what would it take for one segment of our population to justify violence against another segment of our population? Oh, wait, it's happening. It's happened all summer long, and it continues to happen to this very day. It's wall-to-wall TV. It's wall-to-wall TV. It's happening. There are scenes and acts of violence and looting and fires and people being killed literally in the streets in America today, not 10 years ago, today, all summer long. People bringing guns to political rallies. Are you kidding me? What is wrong with us? What is wrong in the human condition that causes us to do it? What causes college students to shut down speakers on campuses because they just don't agree with you? So you literally start smashing windows and shutting down you tear up your own college campus. What? It's unthinkable to me, but it's happening in our country today. Listen, citizens, politicians, policemen, students, people who live just average people are being killed in the streets of America. Buildings are being set on fire. Billions are being lost because there's a darkness in the human heart. And it's being played out before our very eyes. What is it? So my point simply is this. Before we get on the Romans, before we get on the Jews and go, wow, look what they did to Jesus. Look what we're doing in our own country to our own people. We have to ask ourselves, what leads us to dehumanize one another? What is wrong with us? In essence, what causes us to join the crowd and pile on? Yeah, something bad's happening. Let's go join that. It was the case of the religious leaders who stood by and the crowds who stood by, who humiliated Jesus. So it is today with us. And I'm prepared and I wonder about the words from the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Well, I'm going to pair words 5 and 6 together, because I think they do kind of belong together here, these words of Christ. When Jesus says, I thirst, which is tied directly really to the proclamation, or it's tied closest, I think, to the proclamation of Jesus saying that his work is finished. It's been accomplished. These two are kind of together. So it really is a simple statement that Jesus makes as he's dying on the cross. And it almost seems out of place compared to all the rest of the statements, because the rest of the statements seem so big and so dramatic, and now he says, I thirst. Oh, it's finished. Yet these seemingly insignificant statements that are made here are only recorded by John. John seems to have this knack of taking things that seem unimportant or just you gloss over, and he helps us see the significance of those in the life, death, and in the resurrection of Christ. Among several interpreters of Scripture, we see this scene, this picture, this picture of humanity and Christ on the cross. And at some point, I think that John's trying to help us obviously see the humanity of Christ. That's one thing. He wants us to recognize that Jesus is human, and before his death, he thirsted. Of course, Jesus died like we died. But on multiple occasions, the idea is taken that perhaps, and Jesus uses drinking, of course, as a metaphor in his own teaching and in his own writings. And so is it possible that John is helping us to point back toward the willingness of Jesus to say, I'm drinking this cup. I'm thirsty, but I'm drinking this cup that God the Father has set before me, and I will drink this cup until it is empty. I will drink it to the bottom until it is done. Perhaps he's pointing to the fact that the cup is now nearly empty. I don't know. But his time of suffering, we do know, is drawing to a close, and this cup of suffering is going to be empty. This particular interpretation does seem consistent with John's statement that after this, Jesus, knowing all things were accomplished, said, I thirst in John 19. And then it's an indicator that he had finished this cup that the Father had given to him. And as we reflect on Jesus saying, I thirst, we're reminded of Psalm 42 with these words. As a deer longs for flowing streams, my soul longs for you. Oh God, my soul thirsts for you, the living God. I wonder if Jesus was saying out loud what his heart was longing for, which was to be with God. He had been separated from God in that sense. And maybe he was pointing back to the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know, where he said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Regardless, we can offer others a cup. A cold cup of something good inside, not the wrath and the sin of the world, but something good. And Jesus says that when you do these things for others, you've done them unto me. So at the end, Jesus offers this final prayer. And Jesus says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, in Luke 23. Now, these final words of Jesus are also found in a psalm, Psalm 31. And I want to read that psalm to you. I'd like you to close your eyes, if you can, or if you want to, and just listen to these words contextually, where Jesus says, into your hands I commit my spirit. And here it is. It says, in you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock and refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Keep me from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit. This is Jesus' dying prayer, folks. I think this is important. This is Jesus' dying prayer. This is Jesus' prayer of absolute trust in God. Think about that. Jesus had forgiven his enemies. Jesus had offered mercy to the thief on the cross. Jesus had taken care of his mother, prayed for his mother. He came to the place where Jesus had felt forsaken. Jesus had come to the place where he had expressed thirst. And before his death, he declared in triumph, it's finished. And now Jesus offers this beautiful prayer of absolute trust in God. And what was his trust in God? Into your hands I commit my spirit. One biblical scholar says that Luke's gospel suggests this prayer from Psalm 31:5 was actually a prayer that Jewish mothers would teach their children before they would go to sleep at night. How beautiful is that? You imagine Jesus knew this probably from a child. And he would say this to his heavenly Father at night before he would go to sleep. Into your hands I commit my spirit. This was incredibly familiar to him. So on the cross again, Jesus is teaching us how to pray. This is his last prayer. We're facing darkness, facing despair, going through the valley of the shadow of death. Maybe we're just going through the valley of the shadow of whatever life's handing us today. What should our prayer be? Our prayer should be, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Lord, whatever comes, I commit myself to you. I belong to you. John describes Jesus as the Word made flesh. I'm going to wrap up here. John describes Jesus as the Word made flesh. The cross is the pinnacle, right? The cross is the pinnacle of the life of Christ and everything we've seen happening. John speaks to this moment as the glorification of Christ. He's glorified on the cross because the cross is the moment in which God has given himself as the rescue for the creation that he made. God's creatures, the moment in which God convicts us of sin. God reveals the costliness of this grace that he's offered. And he literally takes up the sin of the world. He places it on himself. And he shows us what love really looks like. Not just love, a sacrificial love from him to us, but from us to one another. So in the death of Jesus on the cross, we've got a couple of takeaways. God is speaking a profound message to humanity, and it's this. The message of the cross has the power to save us. The message of the cross has the power to restore our relationship to God. And the message of the cross has the power to restore our relationships with one another. And in fact, it has the power to save the entire world. Thanks again for listening this morning. And I hope that these words were a blessing to you. Thank you.